There was a time in my life that I had a very practiced muscle around doing a lot with a little. And it makes me think of a time where it was like, okay, what we have here are 2 cans of black beans. Now, what are we gonna do? And turns out you can do a lot with 2 cans of black beans. So, sometimes we can think that we need so much. I think I need so much, but you just need a little bit. When I started coming here 14 years ago, I had just completed a relationship with a man. And it was like just this incredible relationship in so many ways. It was like deeply passionate. It was profoundly connected. There was a sense of beauty that I experienced in that relationship that felt very new to me. And we wanted different things. I really, at that time, the context that I had was marriage. I wanted to be married. I had raised 2 kids for many years at that point on my own and had started under very dramatic beginnings. I was young, I was 18. The relationship that I had with my older children's father was very tumultuous, very erratic. And I just thought, if this guy and I would get married, then it would all be perfect. The challenge was that he had been married 2 times before, and he had no fantasy of marriage. And so we were sort of going down different trajectories. I had a strong attachment to the fantasy of what our life could look like as married people. And he had a great interest in living separately and having fun rendezvous. There was a misalignment there. And it became clear to me what I didn't want. Like, all I could see at that time was, this isn't it. And that, for me, is what divine discontent looks like. Sometimes you don't know what you want. Usually, in my experience, the way I get to knowing what I want is by sitting in the experience of what I don't want. And yet we always, or at least I always want to skip that part. It's like, can't we just get to the feel-good stuff? But when I showed up at Bodhi, I just knew that I didn't have what I wanted. This isn't it. And as some of you know, I walked in, and we were meeting out of Transitions Bookstore at the time, which was in the Annex building on Kingsbury, where, I don't know if Best Buy still exists, but that was there, and it was just down the street. And I walked into for the first time, and there was this man named Daryl Jones there. And I looked at him, and I go, that's it. That's what I want. And he became my mental equivalent. A mental equivalent is the ability to hold a picture of that which you desire. See, your mind thinks in pictures. It doesn't think in words. We use lots of words to say lots of things, but actually creation occurs through imagery. So I went from this isn't it to that's it. And it wasn't like, well, for a moment it was like literally Daryl was it. But that did not go so far, so swiftly, so well, and we were friends. So then it became like a metaphor. That's it. And as a result of taking many classes here and doing a lot of forgiveness work, a lot of healing work, I had a moment where I realized that I was really holding my children's father outside of my heart still. And I had a lot of supporting evidence. And it was in one meditation, in one class that I took here, that it all started to fall apart. The constructs that I had crafted to keep myself safe started to crumble. And through the course of this particular class, I developed this affirmation, which you've heard me reference before. I am in loving and intimate spiritual partnership with my best friend and husband. And it was just a matter of weeks before I ended up meeting Nathan here. So I just want to sort of share my process. What I started with is, this isn't it. And I sat in the discomfort, the divine discontent of what I didn't have and what I didn't want. And so sometimes we can sort of jump over that. And it's like, just place your attention on the affirmative. And while that's good and there's great value there, there's actually great wisdom in being in the discomfort. So that's not it. This isn't it. That's not what I want. That's it. That's what I want. Picture in my mind's eye creates a whole experience of a feeling tone. I am in loving and intimate spiritual partnership with my best friend and husband, and boom, there he shows up. In a very mystical encounter that many of you are familiar with. Nathan and I met. We moved in within 2 weeks. We got married about 4 weeks later, and we closed on our house, total 8 weeks, beginning to the closing date. And it was, we're going to actually share some of the more intimate details of that experience on February 17th. So if you're here, I hope you'll join us. He's going to join me up here. And you'll get to hear it from Nathan's perspective, which is very different, I'll tell you. We actually have like a good choreography now where we sort of like, I'm like, all right, tell that part. That's not what happened, but go ahead. And he's like, all right, go ahead, So it was a very mystical meeting. It was like if I could have ever imagined a coming together with an intimate and spiritual partner, we had that moment. And then it got very dark. For many years. And I oftentimes say, if Nathan had not held the vision of what he experienced as the purpose of our coming together, we would have been much more troubled. He was much more devoted than I was. For me, I was like, we got a mortgage and a marriage, and I'm stuck. And he was like, there's a great idea for us. And I was like, oh gosh, are you sure? Because it's not feeling that way. And fortunately, we kept showing up. We kept showing up, and it would get loud, it would get messy, it would get uncomfortable, it would get heartbreaking, and we'd show up. And this past weekend, we went on a couples retreat with one of my mentors, Jim Dethmer, and his wife, Debbie Burdett. And they presented a context or a container. And it was, I commit to closeness. And I commit to removing all barriers to closeness. And it was as if I had heard the word closeness for the first time in my life. I commit to closeness. Never had occurred to me. I mean, isn't that curious that you can have a big vision for an intimate and spiritual partnership and the word closeness wouldn't occur for you? So I share that because my guess is we all have things that we desire in our lives, but we can't even begin to imagine what's possible. There's that which we know, but there is a much larger world of what we don't know. When I was a little girl, I would lay in my bed, and my birth name is Laura. And I would lay in bed, and I would just go, Laura, Laura. Who came up with that? You know, it was like, who came up with the L? Who came up with the A? Who put the L, the A, the U, the R, the A together? I mean, do you know? I mean, that's real. This week, I went to Dr. John Turner, Turner Chiropractic. He is one of our longtime community members that he and his wife, Sherry, have underwritten our live stream capacity for much of 2018. Very grateful for him and Sherry. And I said, I have a situation going on. It's like a pinched nerve. And then I said, I also have a situation going on here, and I have the thought that it could be esophageal cancer. And he was like, really? And I was like, and by the way, I'm 40, and I'm told that I should have mammograms now. And I'm thinking, because it's here, and I'm having something going on here, it could also be breast cancer. And he said, well, the turns out that breast cancer does not get worse when you turn your neck. And I was like, okay, that is a good indication that I could be down a wrong rabbit hole. And so he started to tell me about my ribs. And he said, I think I'm going to mess the whole thing up. It's something about the ribs. And he said, because the ribs up here. And I was like, the ribs up here? And he was like, yeah, the ribs. I'm like, no, the ribs are down. I'm trying to tell him where the ribs are. The ribs are here. Just out of curiosity for those in the room, did you know, just by show of hands, did you know that your ribs were up here? Well, I did not. There are many of you that did, I did not. And it was striking to me because I thought, that is something I don't know. Do you know how much there is that we don't know? And yet we will walk on the planet as if we have this thing figured out. Look, this is my situation. We have three options. Either this is the cause, or that is the cause. What do you think? It's like there could be an infinite number of causes. In the same way that as you and I have deep desires, imagine that there are desires that live in you that you don't even know yet. Closeness wasn't even a context I held as a possibility. I had an intimate and spiritual partner, but closeness had never occurred. And it is amazing how when you create a new thought and a mental equivalent, you can actually have a new experience. I commit to closeness. I commit to removing all barriers to closeness. Around that particular context, just ask yourself for a moment, in your relationships, whether they be work, whether they be family, whether they be children, whether they be partners, is closeness an orientation in which you walk? My suspicion is for most of us not. My suspicion is for most of us, we're living in sort of a defended place, protecting ourselves from any future hurt. That would be a barrier to closeness. So, we're reading this book called Spiritual Economics in the Conscious Leadership Program, and I just want to share a little bit. It's one of my favorite books. I think I probably first read it 20 years ago. And Eric Butterworth says, there must be a need before we attract an answer. And so often we will resist the word need because we will say to ourselves, well, I don't need anything. Well, what if you do? What if you do? What if you're in this human incarnation for closeness? What if you're in this human incarnation to open up your heart and have it broken sometimes? And to still keep it open. See, the universe, not like some puppeteer God, we've dismantled that for most of us. There's not some benevolent figure outside of ourselves giving us that which we want if we're good little beings. We understand it still lives in us because it's very much in the collective consciousness. But we understand, or we're coming to understand, that when you place a need, you can then stand in a demand and the universe will give it. Closeness didn't occur for me because it wasn't even a need I knew I had. And up until that point, I didn't think I needed it. If I had been provided that context a year or 2 or 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have even heard it. So I wonder, what is stirring in you as a desire? Perhaps one you know, and are you open to the desires that you don't yet know? So he cites this really brilliant woman named H. Emily Cady. And she says, the demand must be made before the supply can come forth to fill it. See, the word ask, and we've talked about this before, the word ask can live like out there. But its Greek and Latin roots actually mean a demand, to claim, to declare, to say, this is what I'm standing for. And that's what Nathan did. In an act of generosity, he kept standing for closeness. I believe Nathan knew the context of closeness before I did. And he kept holding it, holding it, holding it. So I don't know if you're in a partnership right now and it is feeling uncomfortable. It is feeling like, why are we even bothering? You know, I am your classic girl, 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out. Saddle me with a little bit of debt to sit my butt down. That's what it took, a big mortgage. Or if you're someone that is single and would like to be in a relationship, just use the metaphor of relationship right now. Allow yourself to stay open, your heart to remain open. There is a need in the human experience to have the salve of love on our hearts. And just be mindful if you tend to close your heart. So, you know, the way that this whole experience of desire and of wanting has occurred for me in my life, I mean, that's certainly the journey of relationship, of intimacy has been what has felt like a long one for me. You know, I said to Jim and Debbie, I said, I think that Nathan and I will have life before the retreat and life after the retreat. It's sort of like BR and AR in the Wright household. And the experience that I've had professionally around this idea of desire has looked similar in some ways. When I left Bank of America in 2012, the conversation that was going on in me was, I would rather live in a cardboard box than live this life. Now, I shared that once before, and someone sent an email and said she's making banking wrong. Nope, just wrong for me. Might be right for you. So don't get lost in the content. I was sitting at Bank of America, and my thought was, I would rather live in a cardboard box than live this life. I knew what I didn't want. This isn't it. And so I left. Now, perhaps you're familiar with the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. He says, if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy. There's some correlations in my mind. I see all these cosmic connections around that which I desire. You know, you and I have this distinction called choice. To work, the highest version of work, is a demonstration of love. If your work is not being used as a portal or a catalyst for love, which, by the way, can transcend industry, then you may as well lay it down and go receive alms at the temple from those that do their work with joy. Can you imagine if you started living a life that freed yourself of this perpetual discontent, this perpetual idea that you are some kind of cog? We have the great opportunity to live a life that fully exposes our aliveness, that fully exposes our joy, that fully exposes our love. And that doesn't mean that it looks comfortable or easy all the time. That's the mistaken thought. But the talk title today is Clarifying Your Deepest Desires. And my experience is that people have no idea what their deepest desires are. That in fact, we live so constricted inside of so many considerations. We have propped up our lives with all kinds of bills and all kinds of stuff. And then we sit back and we go, what am I doing? I don't even have my deepest desires here met. So in your intimate relationships, what is the quality that you're inviting forward? My new quality is closeness. In your work, what is the quality that mobilizes you, that moves you? For me, it's aliveness. If my work causes or inspires or provokes in me a diminishing return, I would rather have a cardboard box than do this thing. So, the greatest thing that we can each give to humanity is a clean space, a free space. I'd love for you to just close your eyes for a moment, take a breath, and just see if you can do a little inventory of the places or spaces in your life that you've determined or decided that your deepest desires are not possible. And just see if there's a place or space that comes to your mind's eye that's co-signing on suffering or discomfort in a chronic kind of way. Just imagine that you have your hands held before you, and you could actually place that thing in the palm of your hand. And move into a new relationship with it. Imagine through the use of your breath, you could start bringing your life into greater alignment, cultivating your deepest desires. You could lay down any tendency that you may have to naysay or to thwart or to diminish that which is seeking to come through you. For Rumi says there is nothing placed on the heart of any individual that is not fully sourced and supplied with all that it should need to come forward. So I invite you to take a deep breath. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Eric Butterworth goes on to say, we slip into an entropic consciousness through synchronizing our thoughts with the negative thinking of the world. Entropy is the process by which forms begin to disintegrate. So if you align yourself with what's not possible, if you align yourself with the survival tendency of your wiring, life will begin to disintegrate. One of the incredible capacities of the human experience is to rise into a higher state of consciousness and to give yourself permission to slough off the resignation or the cynicism that can get collected with age and experience, and to continue to invest in the idea that you can cultivate your deepest desires. Now, what my experience is that your desires are not found in things. Things can be fun, but your desires are usually found in feelings, experiences, the presence. You are a living magnet, constantly drawing to you the things, the people, and the circumstances which are in accord with your thoughts. Daryl Jones became a mental equivalent for me of an intimate and spiritual partner. And then I got served up this incredible being that looked and felt like nothing I had ever experienced before. Nathan, if we hold a high idea, the possibility exists for something far greater than we could ever imagine. That couples retreat was intended to be like a work experience for our couples retreat. Jim, carry on now. I'm taking notes. But there was something greater at play. Closeness got delivered. There's a scripture in the Christian Bible that says, "Be still and know that I am God." The Hebrew and the Aramaic of "be still" actually means repent. And in the context of what was occurring at the time, it said, stop looking at the limitations. Rest in the high idea of something greater going on here. Imagine if you said to yourself, "Be still, beloved, and know that I am God." You are it. So you might place your hand on your heart and just see, like, how available is that for you? Be still and know that I am God. Just check in. If you are the individualized manifestation, the presence of all that is, that some call God, spirit, source, universe, all that is life itself, then how could it be that something would come through you, that this or something greater wouldn't be made possible? So we're going to do a Thich Nhat Hanh meditation together, if you're okay with that. And, you know, my invitation for you this week is twofold. To intentionalize your meditation practice. If you're someone who has a robust meditation practice, great. If you don't, just take a week and get a little more intentional. That doesn't mean it has to be longer. It just can be intentionality with my breath. And then I'd love to ask you to do something called morning pages, which is a practice that comes out of the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and it's keeping a journal at your bedside table. And before you even step out, just allow the stream of consciousness to stir in you and just write every morning. What's moving in you? Cultivating, clarifying the deepest desires of your soul. There is a high idea of which you are here to be in service of. It is not associated with a job title. It doesn't have a particular make or model. It's a quality, it's a feeling, it's an essence,